If not now, then when?
According to the Talmud, Rabbi Meir said that we should say 100 blessings a day, but I am only going to say one. But which one blessing should I say? This is the great thing about Judaism. We have such a rich language for reflecting on the blessings in our lives. There are so many times each day that we can stop to be grateful for what we have, to recognize the uniqueness of the moment, to connect with one another and the world around us. There's a blessing for hearing a thunderstorm, a blessing for seeing an ocean, a blessing if you're in the presence of wisdom, or a blessing if you smell a flower. So many moments of sanctity and transcendence. Which one? Well, when I'm thinking about the work of Hazon, Isabella, Freedman, I'm naturally drawn to the blessings around food. The blessings before and after the meal. Motzi and Birkat Hamazon. Hamotzi, the blessing before eating bread, is one of the shortest, only 10 words long. It's a blessing of anticipation, of expectation. I can't wait to taste that bread, that delicious, crunchy, whole grain, organic, locally grown, hand-baked. But maybe it's also a little bit of a blessing of anxiety. Will there be enough for everyone? Is it gluten-free? But why such a long blessing after the meal? Well, perhaps it is precisely because we need the longest blessing, Birkat Hamazon. I mean, it's practically the whole prayer service. You have enough time that you can thump on the table, you can get up and dance. People, they add their own words in the middle if it weren't long enough. This long blessing, it curbs our tendency to rush on to the next thing. It makes us slow down, digest, linger. Let us know that once our hunger has been satisfied, we should stop, take a break. It's a blessing of dayenu, of good enough. And so is this moment now? Is it a motzi moment? Or is it a Birkat Hamazon moment? Well, clearly there is this feeling of anticipation. We all want to hear the words of wisdom of our honorees. We're so proud, we're so excited. Maybe some people are already thinking about the Jaffe report tomorrow morning, and they want to hear about that study at Federation. So I should be brief, like Hamotzi. But I choose for us Birkat Hamazon, the blessing of satisfaction. And I ask us to take a moment together to think about all we have already accomplished. Not all there is yet to do, all we have already done. To rejoice in the consummation of the marriage between Hazon and Isabella Freedman. To delight in the springtime, the first fruits of the harvest of the farm and the labor of the farmers, of the Almanics. To take nourishment of mind and body and spirit just from being together with others who share our own vision for a world that has a more loving, healthier, better society. And we take a breath, we take our time right here, right now, in Brooklyn. Baruch atah Adonai, Hazon et Hakol. Blessed be God who nourishes us all. Amen. Amen.
If not now, society inducting, it's all kind of submitted. Good evening, my name is David Weisberg. myself, I'm pleased to welcome you to the 3rd annual If Not Now Society inductions and the first part of the new Hazon. So welcome. Pause for applause right in my comments there. Thank you for that. As I was watching the video that we showed you with Seigle talking about what If Not Now meant to him, and this was a video that we shot right before the first If Not Now event when I took Reb Zalman to Seigle's house for them to meet for the first time. And I will tell you, there was always a buzz around Pete wherever he was. So, just on the video. And I was very fortunate to be able to have a friendship with Pete over the past few years. And of course, in the past couple of months, I've been remembering a lot of things that he shared with me. One of them that's not apropos of this, but I remember I told it, I think to David Ingber very recently, was that I had set up for Pete to do an interview with the Jewish Telegraphic Agency, which happened over the phone, and I was on the conference call as well, and one of the first questions they asked Pete was, they said, Pete, what did you think when you heard that Bruce Springsteen wanted to record an entire album of your songs? And Pete said, I thought it was Bruce Springsteen. But more appropriate tonight, one of the most powerful things that I remember Pete telling me was that when he recorded a song that he borrowed from another culture, and of course Pete recorded a lot of songs that he borrowed from other cultures, and that song made money, that he didn't keep the money, but that he gave the proceeds to a charity that benefited the culture that he borrowed the song from. And to me what this meant was that Pete was this great fountain, that there were all of these sources that came to Pete, but Pete was the fountain that brought him out to the world. And in a lot of ways, I think of Hazon, and particularly Hazon 2014 and onwards, is that fountain with many, many sources, like we showed in the video in the beginning. I mean, just, on any given day, like today, there's a group of children from Barak Academy in Philadelphia, and Isabella Freedman, as part of the Teva program. There's a group of teens, 52 teens from around the country coming this weekend for our 3rd ever Jewish LGBTQ Teen Shabbaton, which we do with Kesha. And it's not only what happens at Isabella Freedman. In San Francisco, folks are signing up for our Golden Gate Ride. In Colorado, final planning is going into our Jewish food festival there, but we'll start a cross-country trip by the Teva Topsy-Turvy bus. In Philadelphia, they're undoubtedly planning another program of shtetl skills. And tomorrow morning, we'll be doing a presentation on really what we finally named this fountain, which is JAWPI, which is Jewish Outdoor Food and Environmental Education, the umbrella under which all of these things that we're doing are tied together. And so that's really what we're here to talk about, what we're here to present tonight. I'm particularly excited about our group of honorees tonight because they're all people who I know and care about and admire. Barbara Ribakove, Gordon, my really wonderful friend. A huge unsung hero, not only for the work that she's done with the Ethiopian community, but the little trivia question about Barbara is that if you Google her, actually the first thing that comes up is that Barbara in 1960-something wrote the first book ever on Bob Dylan. So this is a really... Robert Zimmerman. Margot, Seigle, one of our wonderful... Margulies family who really touched every part of every first Rabbi Ingber, who was inspired by what happened to Isabella Freedman in our night in Hazon, and he built an entire community based on it. And so let's get this kicked off. And I'm going to invite up Solomon Ezra.
Hazon was Margot is the most important person in Egyptian Jewish history in our time. Over 30 years, she gave up her career, her comfort life to Egyptian Jews.
That's a fix the bike.
She still never stopped working day and night to make sure Egyptian Jews not left behind in education, social injustice in the Israeli society. Barbara is the founder of the North American Conference of Egyptian Jews. With also, let me present you, she is my role model, the rescue of my family and my people. My second mother, my friend, the hero of all Egyptian Jews, Mrs. Gordon.
Well, I grew up during World War II, and I was living in Germany shortly after the war. My father was a civilian with military government in the occupied American zone, and that was where I saw my first Holocaust films. And it was a life-changing experience. I was 16, I think, and nothing was ever quite the same again. And when I went to Ethiopia for the first time in 1981, what I saw was an abandoned Jewish world. And if you remembered World War II, even from the safety of America, and you learned about the Holocaust from reports, not from, God forbid, having been in it, you just couldn't turn around and walk away from a Jewish community in big trouble. Now, I grew up in a very assimilated family, and I said, you know, I only know one thing about Jewish organizations, and that's that there are too many of them. And I don't see what an organization can do that an individual can't do, and an individual can't do anything in Ethiopia. It's under this terrible communist rule. You can hardly sneak around Ethiopia as a white person who doesn't speak the language and looks rather conspicuous, and they won't let us go to any Jewish villages, and you can't send them anything by mail. So what's the point? And my friend said, an organization can do more. And in the end, I said, all right. And 4 of us got together in my living room and started talking. Well, to be on the last plane of Operation Solomon was, first of all, knowing you had participated in a miracle. It just couldn't have happened, and it did happen. We see people pull themselves up out of poverty with a little help at the right time, in one generation. That's not supposed to happen, especially when you have a gap as big as the gap between life in Ethiopian mud hut villages and life in modern Israel. And it does. I had always thought if you were scared of something, that meant you couldn't do it. Turned out you could. Being afraid was just one of the things you had to deal with, and go ahead and do it. That was an amazing thing. I don't know if it was in my nature before or not, but there must have been something that didn't mind an adventure if it had a purpose. I was going through at one point a fear of heights. In fact, I had it when I went to Ethiopia, which was not a good thing to be sitting on a mule in the Semien Mountains to have at the time. And the year after I had been to Ethiopia, I went to Burma with friends of mine, and we went to a town called Pagan, which was largely unexcavated pagodas. And I remember when my friend's husband, Gabriel, climbed to the top of one of them and called to Carol and me and said, hey, come on up here, there's a beautiful view. And I looked up at this thing. And I said, Gabriel, is there an endangered community of Jews on top? He said, no. I said, then I'm not going. I'm scared of heights. And to be part of this story and know you've played some part in it, that's something that just fills you with more amazement. I'll say something about social justice. When a few of us, some of whom are here right now, started out in Ethiopia, we didn't apply for social justice because there was none to be had. The UN had a long list of human rights, and only 2 of them were available in Ethiopia. You could practice your own religion, and you could marry a woman. That was it, and practicing your own religion didn't count either if you were Jewish and you wanted to A, learn Hebrew and B, leave for Israel. Those were not part of your rights. What there was a passionate desire on the Jewish part to go home to Jerusalem. When we visited villages that were desperately poor, in need of absolutely everything, they didn't ask for anything else. They said, help us go to Jerusalem. And so, for some years, that was what we did. I want to add, nobody does anything all by herself or himself. It was Solomon Ezra who showed us how to get Jews out of Ethiopia on fake papers. We were in what I call the forged document business for quite a long time. And there's a white group used the role of advocacy in Israel to bring thousands more out. It's something you do with other people who care and want to work and don't get discouraged. No matter how difficult it seems, how impossible, somehow, if you really want it and work hard enough, and you take leadership from the people you're trying to help, then things happen that you didn't believe would happen. And that's the most wonderful thing in the world. In Israel now, there is social justice available, and although the community in Israel has many, many challenges to meet, many difficulties along the way. Again, they are going to make it, many of them already have, and as long as we keep caring, helping, and never giving up, everything's going to work out very well. Thank you all. You're all terrific people. You care about things. You act on behalf of things that you want to have happen, and it's a great joy and an honor to be with you all. Thank you.
I'd like to call up James Schaefer.
It's Hazon's seat.
Good evening. My name is James Schaefer. I have learned so much from Margot Seigle's leadership, and it's a real pleasure to introduce her here at the If Not Now When induction ceremony. Margot and I first met in 2010 at a conference called Making Money Make Change. which is for young people with access to financial wealth who are committed to social justice work, showing up fully to realize those visions. And we got involved in a working group to respond to SB 1070, which was a new law that passed in Arizona. It's a human rights crisis, families being separated, and a deportation policy based on attrition. And working with Margot as a young donor who has sought out and found some of the most strategic and radical organizing happening anywhere in the country has been deeply inspiring. She supports these movements not only with her financial resources, but also the full backing of her profound interpersonal abilities to pull people into the work in ways you couldn't possibly imagine. Margot organizes with a strong anti-racist politic. From her time working with the Ingber project, the Ingber program of the Catalyst Project in Oakland, California, Margot really brings an understanding of Margot really making the connection between racism and how the supremacy of whiteness in this country works. And not only that, but also how different Jewish identities are racialized differently in this country. Margot continues to lean into Jewish practice and reclaiming resilience baked into our tradition that has been eroded by the isolation of modernity and the pull of assimilation into undifferentiated American normalcy. We are so appreciative for all the work that you're doing. Turns out these are far too many words for an introduction. So, now we'll move forward towards the end. Alright, good. So, another thing to mention about Margot is that Margot is also powerfully open in her identity as a queer woman with access to wealth. And that invites a lot of complications around exposure and also what responsibility it entails. As someone who also identifies as a young Jewish person with wealth, I really appreciate that because there are a lot of ugly caricatures in the world of the wealthy Jew. And we have to hold both the responsibility to redistribute resources from a deeply unfair system, and to shout at the top of our lungs, yeah, the Jews actually don't run the banks, thanks very much. We hold these together in the work that we do, and I learned so much from the commitment that Margot brings. I'll close by saying, if I can find it, that when I first met Margot, her big dream was to one day buy some land and have this sort of vibrant, participatory commune in harmony with the land. And what do you know, here she is at Isabella, Freedman, and with Hazon. The thing about Margot is she doesn't actually even need a plot of land. Look at what you've cultivated, Margot. Look at all the people that you have brought together. May you always find the courage to follow your true vision of justice. As is written, justice, justice shall you pursue.
If not now, when is kind of a question I've always, it's like in my blood, it's a question I've been asking since I was a little kid. My parents will tell you stories of how I organized a toy drive at the age of, I think, like 7 at my elementary school in 1st grade. If not now, when, in terms of like going and feeding the hungry and feeding the poor and volunteering in our communities, but then when it comes to looking at our own privilege and our own wealth, there's like this block and this scarcity and this feeling of like, I'll give it away when I'm older, and it's not really in the sentiment of if not now, when. It's like, it's more like, I don't know, like if not now, you know, can wait until I'm 90 years old, or to the next generation. There's no better time to redistribute the resources I have access to than right now. And I think, I see injustice, on a daily basis. It's like everywhere. And so I think, that a big piece of it is seeing that and knowing that I have access to something that actually changed that, and that I think asking myself, like, why wait? My friends and I, a few years back, started a collective called the Hummingbird Collective, and we pooled our resources and fundraised our families and our communities to fund migrant justice organizing in Arizona. And I think we'll have moved almost $500,000 by the end of 2014. And so, on our end, it's a lot of like fundraising and talking about money and trying to get people to give money, and it's kind of hard to like picture what that feels like on the ground. And then this past 2 weeks ago, I got to travel back down to Arizona and see the impact that's had on communities down there. And these are communities where people on a daily basis are being split and our families are basically being destroyed through the immigration system, and people are being deported, and businesses are being raided, and children are growing up without one of the parents in the household. And just to go down there and see the impact that the money we had raised had on the communities down there, and how it's supported both like people getting out of deportation and getting to come back with their families, and it's how it's supported community building and people really building power from the ground up, has been super. I think I grew up and got involved in social justice work with this mentality of like working 60 hours a week and just like giving everything for the movement. Like that's what it meant to be a good activist and a good organizer. And recently, in the last few years, I've just been unwinding that, unpacking that, and realizing that in order to do the work I want to do in the world, that actually it's about like my healing and my process, and that like feeling myself first, and that's going to make me more effective in the world. With my work in resource generation, I work with a lot of young people with access to wealth who are answering a lot of the same questions, and often we talk about like how much is enough is like a big question, and that's kind of been my advice the last year or two, is like, somebody once told me like, what's the most you want to give, and then give a little bit more. And so I think I've taken that as like, give at the level where you feel a little bit uncomfortable and where it feels a little bit scary. And my Jewish identity is so tied into my justice work, and how reclaiming that is really so crucial in me pushing back against injustice, pushing back against racism and the way that assimilation has caused us to lose a lot of our culture. I feel like so grateful for this place and for finding Adama and for finding Freedman. I think it's really, at its core, it's really grounded me and myself and in my traditions and my practices. I think I look at my life like pre-Freedman and post-Freedman, feels like two very different parts of my life. Healing work and this internal work, but that can only go so far, right? And then I need to be thinking about what is my specific place in the world, both, as a Jewish person, as a queer person, as a woman, and also a person, like a white person, a person with access to class privilege, and a citizen of this country. Like, what is my role, and how can I really strategically use that unique role to make the greatest impact? And
Margot, Michael.
So as you learned from my friend James, we're a bit long for words, and as you saw in my video, I talk really fast, so bear with me. I first want to thank James for being with me and being along my side the last 3 years. It's been, you're such a crucial part of my life. Thank you for being here. And I want to thank the Freedman community for giving me space to explore myself, to be my full wild self, with loving care, kindness, and an unyielding commitment to craft nights, singing whenever and wherever, and free Shabbos mikvahs. And to my radical Jew Rabbi for being the foundation on which I stand, thank you for being you and for being here today. And to my family, for my parents, instilling in me a relentless pursuit of justice, for my brother Joel for joining me in our commitment to growing an interdependent and loving relationship. Thank Thank you. And to my ancestors, to my grandma Laura, who realized that being wealthy no longer meant safety, paved the way to survival for her family by fleeing Germany on her own in 1946 at the age of 17. My great-grandpa, who valued the importance of holding on to Jewish traditions and community, started the synagogue of my childhood where my parents met. My grandpa Harold and later my father and my uncle Harry were working their asses off to build a safety net for our family. Thank you. And my grandma Herb taught me the value of gardening and building community. My grandma Cyril taught me a deep sense of generosity, the importance of family, and to speak slowly. So, if my mom came up to me before to like speak slowly, I was like, it's already my speech, don't worry about it. So, I'll try not to let her down. And deep gratitude to those who I don't know who paved the way, who have fought, prayed, and died for me to be standing here in front of you today. So, over the past year and a half, Isabella, Freedman, and the Hazon program have had a profound impact on my life. So it is with great honor that I stand before you today. I want to share a little story with you that I think gets to the core of how this community has shifted, or as we say in the zone, transformed, my ability to answer the question, if not now, when. Last month, I traveled to New Mexico to visit my longtime friend and comrade, Margot. I arrived just after dinner and joined him in an intergenerational mix of members of his Chicano community around the kitchen table. All eyes are on Helga, an elder of the community, as she explained the importance of feminine energy within their tradition. I noticed myself adjusting and trying to fit in, attempting to hide the fact that yet again I'm the awkward gringa in the room. Not having a culture I felt proud to share, while also wanting desperately to hide my privilege, blending in had seemed an effective method of immersing myself in various communities over the last decade. But something this time felt different. Instead, I take a deep breath, as I learned through lots of morning sits during Adama. And instead of disappearing, I try to stay with my own experience. And as I sit there, I stay mostly quiet, but kind of remain present in the banter around the kitchen table, and soon instruments appear, and Helga and her husband Jose lead the group in a series of conchero songs. Built in the back of an armadillo shell, the concha pronounces a beautiful sound, which, along with their voices, is entirely mesmerizing. As I watch and listen, I'm reminded of the Friday prior when those of us who remained from Shabbat dinner standing around the table, which is known as a tish in Jewish tradition, in the building Chestnut, which is known as Brown House in Freedman tradition. It still is Brown House still. Over the following days, they continue to share stories and traditions, and little by little, so do I. As part of a grupo, they come together based on the Aztec calendar to practice agricultural ceremonies called danzas. Jose Luis, a 28-year-old farmer and organizer in the community, explains their commitment to the practice after gaining an understanding of its spiritual importance. We're echoing the vibrations of our ancestors, he tells me. And I think back to a day about a year ago when I was sitting at Freedman and talking to my friend, asking her, why do you read Torah? I don't understand, it seems kind of boring. And she said to me, it is my right that has been taken from me, and it is also my obligation to carry down the traditions that have been held by my ancestors for so long. Thanks to the deep immersion into Jewish practices at Freedman, I am now coming from somewhere I feel proud of, somewhere that grounds me in my own indigenous traditions. So finally, I don't have to pretend to blend in. Instead, I can bring my full self, my culture, my stories, my history, and my struggle. And what I notice is that the more I bring me, the more I see similarities between us, between our cultures, and then the more closer and connected I feel. But this closeness also magnifies the pain in many ways we're also very different. That while I'm in great health, thanks to plenty of time for self-care and access to health care, Jose is going in for cancer surgery the following day and struggling to cover the cost. That while I have abundant access to amazing organic food at Isabella Freedman, they're struggling to buy good quality produce. And that while Joaquin and I are both from the Chicago area, with a history of migration not far behind us, my family, like many Ashkenazi Jewish families, has assimilated and little by little risen on the economic ladder, while his family, like many Latino families, struggling with migration status and facing the impacts of racism, remains in a state of poverty. So there are reasons totally out of our control. I have access to abundance, while he's 5-6 figures in debt. So as I plant corn kernels at a time, 3 kernels at a time, as per tradition, with Jose Luis in my final hour in town, I'm struck with a powerful sense of safety and belonging. And I know in that moment that the future of my community of Jews is deeply interconnected with the future of Joaquin's community of Chicanos and of all communities whose peoples have been targeted, persecuted, and robbed of their culture. We're almost done. If I'm not for myself, who will be for me? Asked Hillel. This past year and a half, I've really taken on this question. I've connected to my roots, I've engaged in body-based and healing modalities, and taken time for study and reflection. Hillel continues, if I'm only for myself, what am I? Since returning to Freedman this fall, I've begun to integrate my growth with my organizing while staying grounded in my struggle and what drives me. But I think the equally powerful interpretation of this ancient text is speaking to us as the Jewish community on a whole. If we are not for Jews, who will be for us? To me this says, we must fight to hold on to Jewish traditions, rituals, and agricultural practices. We must resource each other as well as our organizations and institutions. We must create greater equality amongst us and challenge ourselves to make sacrifices in order to make that possible. We must remember that Jews are of all races and class backgrounds and work to build inclusive communities that reflect this diversity. And most importantly, we must love each other with all of our complexities, with all of our loudness, our anxiety, our sense of urgency, and most importantly, our unyielding need to be in control. And though I'll admit there's work to be done here, I think what's important is that we appreciate that these patterns have at many times in our history kept us alive. If we are only for Jews, then what are we? If we're not also aligned with other communities, then what? Not who, but what, he says, are we? To me, this means learning about the struggles of people of color and working class people in our communities, and shutting up for once and just doing some deep talking, some deep listening and not talking, to figure out ways we can best support them. This means investing in Joaquin's community and oppressed communities across the globe to grow their own food and retain their traditions. It means standing alongside undocumented folks because similar policies promote our presence foreshadowed the precipitous road to genocide. It means stopping police brutality in its tracks when we see it in the streets. It means paying the people who clean our homes and take care of our children, living wages and overtime. And we have some folks from J Bridge tonight here. Where are you? Right here. So if you're interested in the last two things, see Nikki. J Bridge is running an awesome campaign against police brutality and for the support, for the rights of domestic workers. So. And last but not least, for those of us who are in a position to giving to struggles led by communities most impacted by injustice. We must act not from a place of guilt and fear, but from a place deep inside our hearts that tells us that their struggles are our struggles and our struggles are theirs. And theirs ours. And we must do this, not when the time feels right, not when we are good enough allies, and not when we feel safe enough to start thinking about others, but now. Because if not now, when? Our team.
So I'd like to call up Liz and Nigel Savage, and I'd like to let you know as they're coming up that all the videos that are shown up here tonight, we're going to email them all to you like tomorrow so that you can watch them again and again and again and again and again. And so if you have trouble understanding something, you'll get a chance to watch it over and over and over. Liz and Nigel Savage.
It's really, really, really a pleasure to be here tonight. Nigel does most of the public speaking in our relationship, so I'm really excited to be word in edgewise. So along with all the amazing people we're honored tonight, we just wanted to personally say a special mazel tov to Rabbi Ingber and his family, who have become really great friends of ours. So mazel tov to you, Ariel, Bear, Tom, and to the whole wonderful community. We're really proud to be part of it.
And as David might say, amen to that. And a huge thank you from me to everybody here, to all of the honorees and supporters and guests and friends for being here this evening. This is an important evening for us, and it really makes a huge difference. So really, really thank you. And all of our work is ultimately about people, which is why we are so thrilled to be honouring the Margulies family this evening, a family like no other. Dear friends to Hazon and to Liz and to me personally. We were originally hoping to welcome 4 generations of the family here this evening, but Trisha's amazing mum Esther had a bad fall last week. And happily Trisha and Fred came from Chicago, so we've got 3 generations of Margulies in New York this week. For those of you who don't know the Margulies, here are a few highlights of how amazing these guys are and what incredible contribution they've made to Hazon, to the Jewish community, and to the wider world.
Kudos for starting this all up goes to Ilan, actually, who first saw the Teva. That's where Nigel met Ilan, and that is how the whole family came to Sukkot in 2008. Then Ellie came to the food conference, and from there to Adamah, and then Fred. Amazing Fred. First he went on the New York ride, and then he was so inspired that he went home, sold a car, and started biking work. And then Trisha, unflappable wife and mom, dedicated board member, and all-around terrific lady. With Fred, they both took some of their land around their envelope factory to start a small farm, aptly named Pushing the Envelope Farm.
When Fred took a fairly spectacular tumble at the New York ride last year, Liz and I both went to the hospital. We both were beyond worried. It felt as though somebody in the family had gotten hurt. And what was Fred's worry from the ER? That he wouldn't be able to lead the Rosh Hashanah davening back in Illinois the following week. This is classic Fred. And once it was clear that he was okay, I called Trisha. And she wanted to know that he was okay, and when she was satisfied that he was, she laughed. This is Trisha, good-humoured, patient, incredibly concerned for others, smart, and amazingly unflappable.
And onto their extraordinary kids, Ellie, Ilan, Daniel, and Ariel. Speaking of people who put their money where their mouth is, Ellie, who I feel like I've known for a very long time, was so inspired by that early food conference that she quit her job at the Philharmonic, bravely, and enrolled in Adamah. And those experiences led directly to her work today as a personal chef, providing healthful and delicious food to so many. We knew that David, now her husband, was going to fit in with this family just fine when he began the wedding planning by insisting that he ride his bike to the chuppah.
Did we mention that Alex Brothers gave a goat for the wedding? They literally showed up with a goat in the middle of the rehearsal dinner. So the Margulies family, including the Shendelwins and now the Rabis, are poster children and also poster parents, grandparents, and great-grandmother in Esther's case, for Hazon. Renewing Jewish life with a smile and a sense of hope, and genuinely trying to create a healthier and more sustainable world for everybody. Personally, every single member of this family is incredibly kind and thoughtful. And as a family, they absolutely decide things as a family. They're more than kind. They're also actually pretty thoughtful and determined about how to affect change in the larger world. They believe both in personal mention of kind and institutional support. The family includes both lay leaders and Jewish professionals. In Fred's case, as a businessman and a rabbi, both simultaneously. So a huge thank you and mazel tov from me. Refer Shane to Esther, so you can send much love. And the final word goes to my great wife.
Well, the final word is actually to take something from you, Nigel. good in this life. He'll be reincarnated in his next one to come back as a kid at Eden Village camp. And I was thinking about it, and I decided if we're really, really good, we might do even better, and we might come back as a member of this family. He's good with me.
Teach your children well. Their father's hell did slowly go by, and feed them on your dreams. The one they picked, the one you know by.
You know, it's sort of like the family joke now. Any Hazon event, like the whole Margulies crew shows up en masse.
I saw it as an opportunity to bring Yiddishkeit through agriculture and to tie the two together and say, here's something you probably never thought about as a Jew. And
sometimes it's hard to take risks, and it's important to know that you don't know what's going to come in the future, and seize the moment.
It was really made more by our children than by ourselves. They knew more about this area of agriculture than we did. I didn't know what was wrong with putting pesticides and artificial fertilizers down.
We went through a process like life. You go through a process. When we came here, when we came to our first food conference, there were a lot of sessions, and one of the sessions was with a person who was talking about land and young people mostly who wanted to go into farming and had no land. And we went into the session, and we had 15 acres sitting at potentially our disposal. And we looked at each other and we said, we have a gift. What are we going to do with this gift? It was a blessing. And we didn't know literally what we would do with it. And we went back and we said, you know, how do we heal the land? What do we do with it? And so we talked to our people in the farmers market, people in our green market, local farmers. We talked to our kids. And the outcome of that was, how do you heal the land? What can you do with it? So we said, let's make community plots out of it. So it was a process of who could use the land, how could it be used, and then we said, well, let's start doing some farming. Well, we were abject failures at farming. We hired a young man in the community, we planted some scraggly rows of crops, and very soon we said, what was our passion, which was education, and how do we go into that? And the epiphany was here at Isabella Freedman when we came to Sukkah Fest to see our son Elon, who was a Teva educator, and we saw so many young people, 200 young people, who came to engage in the environment through Judaism. And they may have been connected to Israel, they may have been connected to Zionism, they may have been connected to Judaism, but they were connected to, you know, Judaism through a varied stream of things. And we said, maybe we can do something in the Midwest, you know, in the western suburbs, to, as Fred said, to connect people for a little bit of Jewish continuity in a different way, and you know, reach through that through a different lens.
I mean, my parents, we have a poster in our home that my father received when he left the rabbinate that said, the two gifts you can give your children. There are two gifts you can give your children. One is roots and the other wings. And so I really feel that my parents have given us that, and I think we've also, as we've become adults, been able to give back to them.
I think what I've learned is that this is another avenue to Jewish identity. And I've seen kids who came back with their parents and showed their parents what they learned in the farm. They showed them the plants and what they were, and they identified them, and they were all excited to be back at the farm.
To me, the question, if not now, when, means that for Rafaela, that there's a future in Jewish community, in living sustainably, in feeding ourselves healthfully, and that we really can be a healthier community moving forward, and that the work that we've done at Isabella Freedman, the work of Adama that influenced me so greatly, exists when she grows up.
I'm still amazed in the factory that we take a roll of paper and turn out a finished envelope, and I'm more amazed that when you plant a seed, you can actually get a pea to grow, or a string bean, or a kale, or whatever it is.
Express this to my family, and I don't know how they'll feel about it, but part of what you saw a brief picture of our farm and you heard about our relationship to Hazon, but part of me feels like coming into Hazon and then pushing the envelope farm has made me once again into a mother, and the farm is that I gave birth to another child. So I don't know how kids feel about that, but I don't know if it has sibling rivalry, but the relationship that we have to Hazon has been undeniably wonderful and gratifying, and Hazon has given us much more than we could ever give Hazon back, and I hope that we can continue this wonderful relationship, and we're so grateful to those of you that we know and those of you who we would like to meet, and we're so grateful for our friends who came tonight, and Hazon is going to continue to give through the job report and all of the work that is done through the food and through the migrating so much to the world. And thank you for this wonderful honor. We're very humbled by it. And I'll turn that over to Fred.
Once in a while, you have the privilege to meet somebody in your life who you feel like you've known forever, and who somehow transforms your life. You don't recognize yourself afterwards, and that's what Nigel Savage did to us, and as a family and individually as myself. You know, people have said to me, well, did you know anything about farming? How did you get into this? And I said, no, we knew nothing about it. You know, we just started and we learned. And then I realized that, in a way, we did know, because my grandfather, I mean, in a funny, unconscious way, subconscious way, my grandfather was a graduate of Mikveh Israel, which is an agricultural school in Israel. He graduated in 1900, and then came to the States to get people to go back to Israel, and got malaria here, and ended up not being able to return to Israel. But so I was born here. But there's this, and we still have notebooks of his studies of agricultural chemistry and things like that he wrote about. So there's this kind of, you know, return to the land, but it's returning to my own personal roots, and it's a very deep and meaningful experience that was all sort of catalytically begun by Nigel. I just want to end with one little story, because I think we all like stories and we should hear them. I used to tell a story when I was in the rabbinate about, it's a story from the Talmud, about a rabbi who was approached with the following question. So, Rabbi, if you want to influence the future, what should you do? And he thought, and he said, if you want to influence the coming year, you should plant wheat. And he said, oh, well, what if you want to influence not just, you know, the next year, but the years ahead? What should you do then? And he said, well, in that case, you should plant a tree. Okay. And then they posed the following question to this Talmudic rabbi. They said, well, what if you don't want to just influence the next generation, but if you want to influence the generations to come, what should you do? Well, in that case, he answered, you should instruct a student. And we've planted wheat and vegetables and all kinds of things. We've planted trees as a carbon offset part of our project. But the part of the farm that I'm proudest of is that we've taken Jewish students from day schools and Hebrew schools and kids who don't go to any Jewish educational institutions, and we've shown them the connection between Hakalut and Yamalut, that the land, as we Jews relate to it, is an expression of values, and that there's an ethic how we treat land, and social justice, and how we treat people. So I'm very pleased about that. I hope that as we grow, we'll influence others to do similar things with their property. Thank you for this time.
I'd like to call up Karen and Freedman.
I'm incredibly honored to introduce the man who founded a community and started a fire. My story starts in 2006. I was on the synagogue board in Westchester. I was chair of adult education, and I wanted to find a scholar resident who no one had ever heard of, who was exciting, on the cutting edge. You get the picture. And I heard about David from a friend who said he was leading a Shabbat service on the Upper West Side. On instinct, I just showed up. And needless to say, I had never experienced a service like that. He had me at hello. When I contacted him to see if he's available to be that scholar, he told me he had 2 weekends free in the entire year. Memorial Day weekend and Labor Day weekend. Why? Because he was holding Rome services in 4 different cities. In Aspen, Montreal, Boston, and New York. I tell you this story to illustrate how David initially offered his vision, not knowing where it would succeed. I was astounded by this man's energy, perseverance, and joyous approach to prayer. And I kept coming back. As a member of the larger Jewish community, then as a board member, and then as the chair of the Roman board for the last 4 years. David is a true visionary. Based on his own journey of seeking a spiritual experience, where one can integrate mind, body, heart, and spirit. Based on his own need to prepare himself physically and intentionally with yoga and meditation. Based on his own yearning for adopting prayer to be fully engaging and alive. To be rooted in our tradition and culturally modern. To be a joyful and expressive experience. Based on his own need to integrate other religious mystics, philosophers, and poets from the East and the West. And through his courage, faith, and will, David actualized his dream. Rome means to elevate, to praise, to raise up. It is an apt description for both the visionary and the experience. David created what he knew to be true in his own soul. You could think he had holy chutzpah to start another synagogue on the Upper West Side, where there was practically a shul on every corner. Or that he trusted if he told his story, it would resonate with others who yearned. And it did. David inspired us by telling us about his own journey. And as he shared his vision, David found others who wanted to be a part of creating the dream he had for Rome. It became a shared dream and vision, a shared sense of purpose. David's dream has had a profound effect on others as a visionary, a rabbi, a teacher, and as a change agent. David teaches from a place of searching, a place of the unknown, a place where you're willing to enter into the mystery and believe you will find something profound and unique to who you are. By modeling and inspiring others, David creates space for your voice to be heard, your heart to open, and your soul to explore. The outcome is creating a community of seekers and believers who could act on their hopes and dreams. I have watched David evolve as Rome evolved over the last 8 years. I have watched him hold on to his vision while trusting others to help support it. I have seen him face the challenges and find the balance with knowing where he wants to go and accepting the steps and stages it takes to get there. I have seen the courage it takes to hold on to his dream and made room for an organizational structure and process to achieve it that involves a bigger board, a growing staff and membership, and a larger pool of funders. And I launched him to practice the art of patience to accompany his innate perseverance. It is a pleasure for me to see a like-minded and hearted organization such as Hazon, with a visionary like Nigel Savage, joined with a vision like Roman, to stand together and compel all of us to support social change and personal transformation in the Jewish world. If not now, when? Gives all of us an opportunity to find hope in our future and to quote David Ingber, add a log to the fire. It is an honor to introduce you to my rabbi, colleague, and friend, David Ingber.
I've heard there was a secret chord that David played and it pleased the Lord, but you don't really care for music, do you?
So Romumu was an outgrowth of If Not Now, When. Right? There was a point in my life where I could no longer run from what I felt God wanted me to do, which was to start a community here in New York City. And so for me, Romumu is fully embodied, fully pre-modern, modern, postmodern, all of the different places that we've gone historically, fully engaging in a meaningful life of the heart and of the mind and of silence, all of that. First experience at Elad Chaim was when I met Reb Zalman in 2004. And that was a pivotal moment in my life. In fact, the entire trajectory of my life changed the moment that I met Reb Zalman. It was at Elad Chaim before Shavuot retreat. I was a rabbinical student at an Orthodox rabbinical school, Chovevei Torah, and I was at a crossroads in my life. Like Elad Chaim and Isabella Freedman are both the R&D lab for the future of Jewish life, both the research and development of new avenues, new songs, new texts, new ways of engaging, and also a deep understanding of the old, a deep understanding of what has been given. And it's the alchemy that happens in Elad Chaim and at Isabella Freedman is absolutely, it's miraculous. People are touched in ways that they didn't even imagine that it could be touched by Jewish practice and Jewish life. Isabella Freedman and Elad Chaim are gifts to the Jewish people. So there was the moment where Romumu was at the church that we're currently at, and we had services, Rosh Hashanah services on a Sunday, and the church agreed to have their church services in the basement. And I said to the pastor, when I got to Romumu that morning, I said, if you finish early, come up and join us, Rosh Hashanah. And around 11 or 12 o'clock, midway through the Romumu Rosh Hashanah services, the entire community of the church showed up in Romumu. And it was just as we were opening the Ark for a prayer called V'chol Ma'aminim, which means for all of those who are believers. And I invited all of the church to come and open up the Ark. And the pastor came and stood with me. And we were singing together, V'chol Ma'aminim, V'chol Ma'aminim. And it was a very much a reflection of this deep ecumenism that Reb Zalman believes, and that religious traditions might not find a way to have dialogue around creed, but we can have a dialogue of devotion. And so Hazon is the embodiment, it feels to me, of what Tikkun Olam means in the most basic form, which is to take a world that is not yet perfected and to add a little bit of perfection. Hazon is raising people up to that vision of a world through God's eyes. I want to see a world where, in New York City, there isn't the inequality within 2 miles isn't the greatest gap in the developed world. That I don't live in a city where there is opulence that is unimaginable with poverty that is also unimaginable. I don't want to see that world for my children. I want to see my children in a world where Judaism is constantly asking the question, not just whether it's good for the Jews, whether it's good for the planet, whether it's good for the cosmos. So if not now, when means radical showing up for any given moment's demand or invitation. If not now means no hiding. If not now means the power of individual choice and its impact on the larger community, the larger world. If not now means that there's only one moment that is demanding my full attention.
Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah.
I'm happy that I'll get a chance to say things more clearly. And coming after the Montreal family, Margulies, I thought we were going to sing so long for it is Ingber nights. So I don't write usually before I speak. These are not notes. I found this, I've been sick for 3 days, which is why I'm not my usual cheery self tonight. And I found this is what happens when you're sitting around in your house thinking about what you're going to say tonight. I found a report card from 5th grade. This is what they wrote. David is an excellent student and conscientious, has an ability to think abstractly, but he needs to learn a little bit of self-control. So I thought I would bring that tonight as a testimonial to the possibility of transformation right here in this First, let me say that I mean this really. It's a huge honor to stand here with people who are really doing transformative work in the world. People who are really walking the talk. People who are changing society in such a profound way. Hazon has incredible reach. Isabella Freedman, Hazon. I was invited last year to the White House by a friend, and I was sitting there and listening to all kinds of things about social justice and social change. And I didn't even know this, but Hazon was being honored, was being mentioned as having the largest faith-based CSA in the entire country. So let me say that it's humbling to stand here with all the people who are doing such incredible work. But I'm being honored for Jewish life and learning. I do teach and live in the world of Jewish professional life. So first I want to thank my amazing wife, Margot and Ingber, who is so supportive and so loving and so much a partner with me in everything that I'm doing, which is really awesome. My father and my mother. When I tell people my story, I let them know that it was a number of experiences in my house that changed my life. And one of them was that there were years when I was completely alienated from Jewish experience, Jewish learning, Jewish context. Some of you might have been patrons in any one of the restaurants that I waited tables at on the Upper West Side. And it was during those years when I was searching for myself. I was very much, I felt what Margot was saying earlier. And I was looking to find myself. And I remember very vividly that I remember being under my father's tallit, under his prayer shawl at various points. And And in my house, my father is a lawyer, so you could never say anything without there being a debate. Which immediately set me up for the Talmudic study I spent over 20 years of my life studying, so I want to thank you for that. And my mother was a voracious and curious individual, came to Jewish life later in her years, but nonetheless has, for the last 60 years, 50 years over, has been such a passionate lover of her people, a passionate lover of all things Jewish. So it is to two of you that I am eternally indebted. Yeah. So I'll make this brief. I'd say that my journey is not my journey. But my journey to start a shul was an ache in my soul that I had to meet. It was an ache in my soul to see the Jewish world and the Jewish experience that mirrored my own life, my own journey. I wanted to pray in a shul where people could get up and dance ecstatically and not feel that it was embarrassing. I wanted to be in a synagogue where everybody was completely welcome. Everybody. The minute you walk in the door, you are welcome, because you know what? It's not my place, it's God's place. Whatever God means doesn't belong to me. I wanted to be in a place where we didn't just talk about Hasidic texts, but we tried to live them. We didn't just read these things and hope that one day somebody would do something with them. So I'm standing here tonight to say to you that people like Margot and Ellie and every other person that comes through Hazon and Isabella Freedman is grafting on to a tree of life that is centuries old and will continue undoubtedly for centuries to come. Each one of those Neshama, each one of those souls that comes out to Isabella Freedman, that participates in the Hazon Ryan, that participates in something that this incredible organization does day in and day out, year in and year out. You are making a pledge. Each and every one of us is making a pledge for the Jewish future. When the Pew study came out and they were wondering where are all of the Jews in the pews, I think the answer is maybe not in the pews anymore, but maybe on the farm. You know? So I want to say thank you to Ribakove for 13 years ago, before the brilliance of my dear friend Adam Berman, who should be mentioned here for sure. Saw that the Ribakove in Rosendale, in Akron, New York, had soul that the body was decaying already. He had a vision to bring together these two worlds, the world of Isabella Freedman and Ribakove. And it took another 6 years or 7 years for another great visionary, Margot, to also have a brilliant idea together with David to try to it's better when two come together than when one sits alone. And I am so, I'm such a fan of you, Nigel. You know, we're good friends now and we're on board. But to be mentioned as a visionary in the same breath as you is really unfair. Because I come to you for vision. I come to you to hear what your pulse is on the zeitgeist. And it's almost always, I have to leave a little bit of room for humility. It's almost always spot on. So, I'll leave you with this. And I could go on, you know, I'm around this. I have a captive audience today. And no, I'm going along, and there's nothing in the Midrash says that today was Rosh Chodesh Nisan. The new month of Nisan was today, Tuesday, Monday night, Tuesday. And it's a very beautiful month for Nisan. The sun is beautiful. It's not about joy, it's about Gula, liberation. And the Midrash says that a number of amazing things happened on Nisan, the first day of Nisan, and one of them was the consecration of the tabernacle in the desert. It was a day when something that had been through many iterations, many stages of construction, finally it was open for business. So it's not now when. So it's not now if there aren't more communities that are the sanctuary like Hazon and Isabella Freedman built. I have a lot of faith in the Jewish future. I really have a conviction that the stronger communities are in the way that Hazon, Isabella, Freedman, all those wonderful programs in the back, all these amazing people. I think that would be the greatest promise to fulfill that she did a whole lot about Ingber, all the time, to bring a world with more compassion, more love. And we all want that world. Amen. So everyone sing a song. Everyone sing a song. Oh Lord, prepare me to be your sanctuary, pure, holy, and loving, pure and holy, tried and true. I'm going to live
so many different ways, and I want to single out Jesse Lipsy. support to tonight's event makes a great deal of difference to us. If you can bid on a silent auction item, and even bid a little more than you might ordinarily bid because you're going to get something special, that would mean a lot to us. And if you were inspired by this evening and could just, as Margot said in her video, dig a little deeper to help, that means a great, great deal to us and allow us to continue doing all of the wonderful things that you came here to celebrate tonight. Thank you. I want to introduce my favorite guest.
I want to start by echoing what David just said about asking you all to help Hazon now. And I want to thank David Westbrook for putting this entire review program together. So I'm honored to be part of the If Not Now When Society, more honored to be a long-term board member of Hazon, and a New York writer. And you get a special treat. Find my picture in the photo of 5,000 writers on the inside back cover of the book. Before I do formal closing remarks, I want to add my congratulations to the honorees tonight. To Rabbi Ribakove for creating a piece of 20th century Jewish history that will never be forgotten. Seigle, a happily young woman with a life and a message for our future. To Margulies family, my colleagues on the board and in the ride, for really walking the walk or riding the ride. David Ingber, who, as you just heard, is creating a spiritual, environmental, ecstatic, and joyous Judaism for the 21st century. As special as those honorees are, though, it occurs to me, and I think maybe to many of you here, that tonight the program would not be complete if we didn't mention the obvious but so far unmentioned honorees. David Weisberg and Nigel Savage for doing what nobody ever does, creating an organizational merger that will make this organization more efficient, more effective, and more oriented toward justice and social change for the next many years. Has that much more vision and intention than either of the organizations did. Okay. A closing reflection, so I'm not as long as the beer cut, but long enough to try to ground all of us going forward. So you know the quote. If I'm not for myself, then who will be for me? If I'm only for myself, then what am I? And if not now, when? It's important to remember every element of this teaching, the recipient of our actions, that is the who, the nature of urgency, the now, and I will add implicitly the where. Because Hazon is committed, as you know, to building a healthier and more sustainable Jewish community on the way to creating a healthier and more sustainable world. So I urge all of us, when we think about our own local communities, when we think about our Jewish community, we need also to remember the world. A world in which 45% of the smallholder farmers are women, but they own less than 10% of the land. A world in which 1 billion people go to bed hungry every night. And perhaps the most sobering fact that I can share with you, newly researched by Oxfam, a colleague organization of the JWS, a world in which the richest 85 people share a combined wealth that is equal to that of the poorest 3.5 billion. So, Pesach is approaching. I think it's time to reflect a little bit more for each of us on the concept of having enough of that in. For me, and I think for most people in this room, this concept is at its core about restoring, finding, and maintaining a sense of balance. You know, the essence of the Exodus story. Going from this narrow place of constriction to an expansive place of liberation. But also, we take that concept and think about it in terms of our own consumption of the world's resources. Some too many people, whom I just talked about, are people enslaved by scarcity. A lack of clean drinking water, a lack of healthy food, a lack of employment opportunity. But there are others, and we know them, and occasionally we stray over that line. People enslaved by excess, by too many supersized sodas, or too much good food, or that irritating internet. And a side moment to salute David Ingber and Margot for having urged us all in Pesach to get rid of the ultimate Hametz story, which is our internet. So we're taught by the Rambam that it's easy to be fooled into thinking that if we're consuming what's permissible, then how much we eat doesn't matter. But that's not the case. We're taught also that anyone who abuses the resources of the world by thinking that these resources are not explicitly forbidden is actually deemed to be a vile person within the delineation of the Torah. And to prevent such overconsumption, we are urged that we should be separated from excess. So as we enter this Pesach season, as we think about liberation and retell the story of our own freedom, I urge that we also think about the millions of people around the world who are still enslaved to poverty, hunger, scarcity, violence, illness, and many other afflictions. I ask that we challenge ourselves, each and every one of us, to take a more active and more meaningful and more effective role in hastening their freedom. That we strive to separate ourselves from excess, to restore balance to our own lives, and to restore balance to the lives of everyone on the planet. Ultimately, it's not what we stand for, it's what we stand up for. And if not now, when? Thank you.